This is vertex form, and today we're going to look at vertex form and see how the different parts of vertex form impact what we call our parent function. So a parent function is this function here, y equals x squared. In vertex form, there are certain things. We have an a value, what we call an h value, and a k value that we're going to plug in to make vertex form. And what we want to see is how does moving a and h and k impact the way the shape of our parabola looks. In our parent function, our a value is 1, our h value is 0, and our k value is also 0. It's important for you to know you will never have an a value of 0 because if you look at this formula, we're multiplying. And if I were to multiply 0 times all of this quantity that's in the parentheses here, it would just be 0, and that would not give us a parabola shape. So our parent function is going to show up on our graph here in the red parabola, and what we're going to do is we're going to see how it changes. And we're going to use a program called Desmos to help us with this. All right, so here's the three things we want to look at in terms of a. I know there's a lot going on here. We're going to focus on just this left side. I want to make a value that's greater than 1. Okay, I'm going to pick any number greater than 1. For example, I'm just going to plug in a 2 here. So if my a value is 2, h is 0, and k is 0, we want to see what's going to happen. So here's that program I have called Desmos. And when I look at Desmos, what I have here are I have 3 little sliders that I can slide around. I've got, right now, my parent function, where my a value is 1, my k value is 0, my h value is 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this a value to match what we had on our paper, which was an a value of 2. Now look at that green function. I want you to notice how it changed. I'm going to change it a little more. Look at what's happening as my a value gets to be a number that's greater than 1. As my number is greater than 1, this function gets skinnier than my parent function. Okay, so when a is 2, which is what we were looking at, we're going to say it gets skinnier. I'm going to sketch in here what it looked like. Okay, so when I had an a value of 2, my parabola actually was skinnier than my parent parabola. And what we'll say is as the a value gets greater than 1, the parabola will be skinnier. We say it gets stretched vertically. All right, so now let's look over here. We want to make a fraction that's between 0 and 1. So let's make this 0.25. Okay, we can make it any fraction that's between 0 and 1, but let's look and see what happens now if we go back to our Desmos activity. So I'm going to make a. So again, as it gets bigger than 1, it gets skinnier, but what happens as we become a fraction? So here we are at 1, that's exactly our parent function. Look at what happens as we're a fraction, and here we are at 0.25. Hopefully you notice that that green parabola is now much wider than my parent parabola. So if I go to sketch it, my new parabola is going to be out here. And we would say if a is a fraction that's between 0 and 1, now my parabola will be wider. We say it gets compressed vertically. It's like we squash it down flatter, and it gets really, really wide. Now the last thing we want to look at is what happens when a is negative. So I'm going to make this, let's say, -1. -1 won't change how wide or how skinny it is, but it is going to change something important. So we're going to take this, we're going to go, there's 0. Like I said, we won't have a parabola. But look what happens when it's a negative number. What happened to it? As a negative number, it flipped below our x-axis. So if I'm down here at -1, we have that exact parent function, but we've now reflected it under our x-axis. So if we draw this in, we have the same width, it's just flipped underneath our x-axis. So when a is negative, our parabola will open down. So our a value controls 3 things. It controls how wide or how skinny our parabola is. It also controls the direction that the parabola opens, whether it opens up or down. Okay, so now we're going to go back. We're going to make our a value 1. This time we're going to change our h value. Okay, and what I want is h to be a positive number. So we'll say a positive number of, let's say, 3. Now, if you look at this, it looks a little weird. It looks like it says x minus 3. But remember, that formula has a minus sign in it. So when I put in a positive 3, it makes it look like what I really put in was a -3. But don't be fooled by that. All right, so I'm going to make my a value 1, because I want to go back to that parent function. And now I want to see what happens as h becomes a positive number. Watch the function. See what happens. There's 1, 2, 3. Okay? I'll come back to that, but look what happens as we get other positive numbers. When h is positive, I hope you notice that the vertex of this parabola is moving, and the vertex of the parabola is moving to the right. So when h was 3, my vertex moved 3 places to the right. We'll take a guess then. What do you think is going to happen when we put in a negative number? This time I'll put in -3. So when I put in -3, I could write it like this, x minus -3. But the shortcut way of writing minus -3 would just be to make this +3. Okay? So what do you think is going to happen when I make my h value a -3? So let's see. When h is negative, which way do we move? We're going to move over here to the left. So I'm going to go back here to -3. I want you to see we've moved the vertex 3 places to the left. And we'll draw it in up here. Now, my a value is 1, so that didn't change at all. So when h is negative, the vertex of the parabola moves to the left. We've got one less thing to look at, and that's our k value. What is k going to control here? So I want k to be a positive number. Again, let's pick 3. Okay, I'm going to put k in there as a positive number. In order to see what k controls, I want to get back to that parent function. So here we are. Now, what happens when k is positive? Look what's happening. A lot of kids will say that this parabola is getting smaller. It's not that it's getting smaller. What's happening is it's moving up on our graph. Okay, there it is. If you notice, my vertex has moved 3 places up that y-axis. Okay, so when k is positive, it moves, the vertex moves upwards. Same parabola, just moved up. And when k is negative, we'll put in a -3 here, so we've got plus -3. Remember, instead of writing plus -3, what you'll see, hang on, you'll see this written. We'll get rid of this plus, and we'll just put -3. But guess what's going to happen? You probably have a pretty good guess, because we see our patterns here. When k is negative, yep, you're right, it moves down. So each part of this formula controls a different part of this parabola. A controls whether the parabola is wide or skinny, and also whether it opens up or down. Our h value controls where the vertex is, whether it moves to the left or the right. And our k value controls where the vertex is, whether it moves up or down.